and welcome live to the studio here at Small Biz Matters. You're with Alexi Boyd. Thank you for joining me for another week full of small business education and lovers of all things small business. It's been a big week for small business here on the calendar. We've had this little thing called an election happen very recently, and good to see Michaelia Cash back in Cabinet with her small business portfolio, an extended portfolio as well, and I'm sure she'll be fine to handle that. It's good to see small business on the agenda when it comes to the federal government. Now, today we are talking all things insurance. Now, I can hear a few of you going, oh, insurance, I know I've got to do it, I know I've got to get it organised, and I know I've got to get round to doing it, but it is a pretty crucial part of running a business. You ask yourself, do I need it? It can be confusing. What types of insurance do I need? What level of cover? How high do I need to cover myself? Why on earth do I need $20 million worth of public liability, for instance? And the biggest question of all for small businesses is, when do I need insurance? Am I really that important? Do I make enough money? Do I have large enough risks? Do I have enough property where it becomes crucial? And how do I start to quantify that to be able to shop around? Well, who better to ask than the founder of Australia's leading online small business insurance service, Michael Gottlieb. He is the BizCover. He is the founder of BizCover. It's an online platform that changed the way micro, small and medium-sized businesses buy insurance online. It provides multiple insurance quotes straight away and the ability to select and purchase the right cover immediately. It's got 100,000 clients, so I imagine that Michael is definitely brilliantly placed to offer his expertise to our Small Biz Matters listeners. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you very much, Alexi. Thanks for having me.
That's an absolute pleasure. I'm really excited about having you on the program, actually, because we've been talking about having you on for a while, but it's a really important thing, isn't it, insurance? I mean, it's kind of up there with, your accountants, your legals, your insurance. It's all that compliance stuff. And in your experience working in the field for so long, do you think that businesses kind of leave it to the end of their list of things to do? Is it, or do they avoid it? Are they fearful of it? What do you think the feeling is around the small business community when it comes to insurance? Or are we getting better at it?
Yeah, I think those are great questions, and I think you're very intuitive around that. It's I think traditionally insurance has been very difficult to get. Our industry has not made it easy for people to navigate through the purchase of insurance, whether it's around understanding what is available in the marketplace or where they can get it from. The fact that there's been very little online offering of insurance has made it very difficult for people to get it. So people have tended to put it into the too hard basket. It ends up being something that they leave till last, and often they require it as part of a contract or part of a regulatory requirement. So it ends up being very rushed and something that most people just prefer to not have to do.
Yeah, I know. Many consultants or professionals out there would say, how many times have you had small business owners who are your clients race up to you and go, I need an insurance broker because I've got to do this market stall, or I've suddenly realised I need to have $20 million of public liability because this particular council who wants to hire me needs me to have it. So do you think it's still a bit of a last-minute process in general?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely is. I think today there's certainly more options now. So, you can go through the traditional channel of your broker, but there are also online options now. So things can happen more instantaneously. Instead of the process taking a week to 2 weeks, things can happen now in minutes or, 10, 15 minutes. You can be done with your insurance because there are options online. So I think it has become easier. And if it's one of the to-do things that you have when you set up a business, then it's something that you can tick off a lot easier now than you could a few years ago.
Do you think that it's made it easier, or are people ill prepared when they do those online setups? Are they just kind of going in there and going, I have a vague idea of what my turnover is or what my stuff is that I need to insure, my inventory? I have a vague idea about it, so I'm just going to throw in some numbers. Or do they come better prepared because it's an easier process to do these things online?
Yeah, I think it's less complicated than people think it is. So, most people know what their turnover is and how many staff they have, what their address is, and what their occupation is. So, really, those are the kind of the key things that you need to get your insurance in place. And the beauty about the insurance industry is it's been around for a long time. And what that means is they've created specific and tailored products for certain occupations. So if you think about any kind of professional, whether you're some kind of consultant, accountant, an allied health professional, or anything that's in the professional landscape, those people typically buy professional indemnity, public liability, and they probably should buy cyber insurance. Whereas if you're a tradesperson or providing some kind of service, those people generally need public liability, and their tool of the trade is very important, so they should insure their tool of the trade. And if you're a retail shop or a cafe, restaurant, there's something called a Biz Pack, which really covers all the insurances that you need under one product, or most of the insurances that you need under one product, the most common one being public liability. So I think that the industry has streamlined this for small business, and there's very specific products that that small businesses need. So it's navigating it has become a lot easier than it used to be.
So it's easier to get the right type of insurance because I guess the questions that need to be asked are not so congruous. They're easier to understand if you're a small business owner. Is it hard for those migrants or people with English as a second language to navigate that? Or again, is the industry getting better in that, in your opinion?
That's a fabulous observation. I think that it definitely is very much an English-centric industry at the moment, and because it's a legal contract and our courts apply everything in an English language, all the contracts that you enter into are in English.
Are they?
Yeah, they are. Well, it's a great point. Yeah. They're in legalese. I'm not sure it's English, but it's once it's a foreign language, it becomes much more difficult. And actually, from a contractual perspective, I think 100% of policies are actually issued in English. That's
right. So, any of you out there who are listening who may have English as a second language or have other language difficulties or barriers, maybe going to a professional association or seeking the help from other more experienced businesses in your industry, mentors, for example, is that a good place to start, do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that, again, from my perspective, I think that the industry's done a great job in simplifying what you need as a small business owner. And as I say, whether it's a professional, a trade, or a retail outlet, there's really very specific products that you need, and the beauty about these products is they're relatively broad. So, there are a lot of good brand names and good insurers out there that you can get your insurance from. If you have a problem with the language barrier, absolutely. You should look for some kind of mentor or someone who can help you along the way. But as long as you can get through the process, typically those products are very well suited to your industries.
Let's talk about underinsurance, because that is a little bit of an issue within the industry as a whole. Small businesses are notorious for not being fantastic at compliance because we don't have a legal team behind us.
Yep.
So how big a problem is underinsurance within the small business community?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's like most other things. You get a varied response to that. So you have some businesses that are, adequately and very well protected. You get those who are somewhat protected, and then you get those who choose to go naked. There's certainly a category of, there's businesses in each of those categories. The statistics say about 13% of businesses are completely uninsured and over 20% are underinsured. Again, I think that the way I always like to talk about this is that everybody believes that it won't happen to them. But the reality is it does, and it is likely to happen to a number of businesses that over the course of their business that they will have some kind of insurance claim. That doesn't mean you should insure against everything. The way we always explain it and we like to talk about it is it's really about the severity of a claim rather than the probability. And what we mean by that is that really insurance is about transferring the financial risk to somebody else. So if the event that occurs is too great for you to absorb the financial impact, that is something that you should insure against. Even if the probability is 0.00001%, if it happens and you lose your business and you lose your livelihood, you're probably going to say that is something I should have insured against. And that's why the probability really just impacts the price, but it shouldn't impact whether you buy it or not. And the example that I often give is, a much greater proportion of people would buy insurance to protect their mobile phone. Now, a mobile phone can be very expensive, but the reality is if you lose it, break it, you probably can replace it. And you probably can afford to replace it. Whereas if you have something like a public liability, a professional indemnity, or a cyber insurance claim or attack, it's highly unlikely you will survive that unless you did have insurance. The cost of insuring your mobile phone is probably not that different to insuring some of the other products.
So it's like as a small business, we need to do our own little algorithm. We need to think to ourselves, not to worry so much about the likelihood of something happening, because you're right. I mean, mobile phones, they drop, they smash, they disappear, they get stolen. But the things that are less likely but will really take your business down, they're the ones that you need to think about insuring and being conscious of. Is it a good idea when you're first starting out to sit down and think about this? Because it's hard when you're first beginning a business. You're not sure what your earning capacity is. You're not sure which direction your business is going to go. Are you better off being in business for a few months first, or do you just start with a really basic package and then re-examine whether or not you're insured properly a few months down the track? What's your best advice to people starting out?
Yeah, I think there's a number of reasons people buy insurance. So the first is that they're required to have it for regulatory purposes if they're part of a professional body. They're required to have it as a contract if they're entering onto a construction site, or if they have a premises, their landlord is likely to require them to have public liability. So as a startup business, there is a high likelihood that you're required to have it for some reason. And those are the basics that you really should buy. As you build your business, if you go back to the point that I was saying before, which is really it's about transferring the financial risk of your business to somebody else's balance sheet. If you have nothing to lose, then the reason that you're insuring is really for the public good. You're insuring because you care about your customers, or if you do something wrong, the right thing is to have some kind of compensation mechanism in place behind you, etc. But the reality is that the primary purpose of insurance is to protect yourself or to protect your business against the financial risk of an event. So if you don't have a business and if you haven't built it up, then you certainly can start with a much more simplified package. And as you have more content or more staff or more assets and more turnover, you can build up your package along the way.
Let's talk about those fundamentals to begin with, like little building blocks, if you will, for insurance. You mentioned the need to have it if you're part of a professional association, for example, the need to have it if you have customers come to you, which is almost everyone. Almost everyone has customers coming to them. So let's talk a little bit about those building blocks. You mentioned professional indemnity, public liability, business interruption insurance, and cyber insurance or personal accident. Could you just briefly explain each of those components for us?
Yeah, with pleasure. I mean, the way that we try to look at it is rather than speak about products, is we try to speak about, the customers themselves and leave the insurance lingo for the insurance companies and the people involved in that industry. So if we look at it from the top and we take, if we start into the three segments and we look at professionals, trades and retail, if we start on professionals, really the core products that you need to buy are professional indemnity, public liability, and for many professionals, cyber insurance.
So this is like the consultants aspect of things.
Yes, consultants, accountants, bookkeepers.
People who sit on their bum.
People and allied health professionals.
Right, who stand.
Who stand, on their feet. But really are providing advice to a customer. The professional indemnity covers you for a breach of your professional duty. Sorry for the, legalese.
No, that makes perfect
sense.
But
it's, if someone alleges that they have suffered a loss because of the advice or the service that you provided them, that is what professional indemnity covers. Public liability is really around a bodily or property damage as a result of your professional service. And you mentioned that most people have customers coming to them. But, the reality is that in the new gig economy, there are a lot of consultants and contractors that, arguably don't have customers coming to them. And the probability of having a public liability claim is very, very small. But the severity is extreme. And even if you're going out to someone else's site and you cause a bodily injury or a property damage, you need to have public liability. So the key building blocks for a professional is professional indemnity and public liability. As soon as you have a website or something where you're reliant on your technology platform, you absolutely should be buying cyber insurance, which I think is probably the most underinsured risk in Australia.
I want to talk a little bit about cybersecurity, cyber insurance a little bit more after the break. So we're going to take a quick break here on Small Biz Matters. There is a jam-packed show going on right now with us. We're talking to Michael from BizCover, and if you've only just tuned in, stay with us because we're going to be talking more about how to insure your business properly, the different types of insurance, and particularly the insurance that people tend to be underinsured for. You're listening to Small Biz Matters with Alexi Boyd. We'll be back after this. Now, today we are talking to Michael Gottlieb from BizCover. He's the CEO and the founder, and of course, perfectly placed to let us know all about the best way to be insured. And just before the break, we were talking about different types of insurance, the building blocks, if you will, when you're first starting out, what you need, what you maybe consider to set up as an estimate to begin with and then reassess maybe a year down the track. Now, we talked about professionals and consultants before the break. Let's talk about the trades and retail and bricks and mortar, because in your experience, do they tend to be underinsured? Do they tend to be insuring the wrong types of things? How can they do it better?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think there's a varied response to that. You get those that are adequately insured, and you get those who aren't. I think the trades and services people are generally more adequately insured than the retail segment. And again, I think it's due to the simplicity of what is required as a tradesman or if you're providing a service. So again, if you think about the building blocks, the key product that any tradesman or tradesperson should have is public liability. So once again, it covers the tradesperson for a bodily injury or property damage as a result of their professional, of their trade. So if you think about dial before you dig, if you hit a pipe, or if you break someone's, if you're a lawnmower and a stone hits somebody's window and cracks the window, etc. It's the property it's the property damage or the personal injury that.
It's funny you should say that about the dial before you dig, because there seems to be a lot better education around the trades when it comes to insurance. I mean, many of us would deal with tradies quite a bit, and it seems to be that they have an idea about the risks that are involved and the types of insurance that they need. Are they simply better educated when they come out of their field of their TAFE courses or whatever it is that they're doing for their tertiary education? Are they better prepared because they've got that idea about what the risks are, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's possibly correct. I think possibly there is a bit of education that they go through, insurance education that they get along there, when they're doing their course. I think also if you're part of a franchise, or if you're on a construction site, or if you, really, for almost all jobs, you need some kind of insurance. So a lot of them have that core building block of public liability. The other type of insurance that really forms part of that building block is if you have a specific tool of the trade that you need to perform your trade, well, if you don't have that, you probably can't perform it. So the two kind of key things that tradespeople buy is their public liability and then covering their tools of the trade. And then for those tradespeople that find it difficult to get, life insurance or income protection, you can also get a personal accident and illness type product, which is relatively easy to get from a general insurance perspective.
It's like what you were saying at the beginning of the program, that the insurance industry has been around for so long that it's really become to understand what the needs are for each of the different sectors of the small business economy, and the products are getting much more well built around those needs. Would you agree that's the case?
That's absolutely the case, and I think the building blocks that we're speaking about is really what almost all tradespeople would need, and arguably nothing more than that. Obviously, they may need to cover their motor vehicle if they have a motor vehicle, but there's probably not much more that they need than those core building blocks. And really the only time they need more is if they are starting to build a business that then has staff and has other tradespeople that work for them, and then all of a sudden they have a small business which has other exposures. They may have an office, they may have contents like computers or tables and chairs and etc. that they want to insure. But really up until that point, it's really about protecting the public liability and the tool of the trade that they're using to perform their trade.
Now let's talk about the not so nice aspect of the industry, which I guess is the claims process. I mean, I think obviously, well, in my opinion, I believe things are improving and it's a lot easier, the process, and it seems to be more automated, which in a way is good. Why is it that the industry maybe has a bit of a negative side to it when it comes to the claims process? Is that the reality, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really sad situation that that when you speak to the vast majority of people, they don't like insurance. They don't like insurance companies, and they feel that insurance companies don't pay claims. The reality and the statistics are that over 90% of claims are paid. So it is definitely not correct to believe that insurance companies don't pay claims. They do. Unfortunately, I think the process sometimes in order to get your claim paid can be very, very difficult. And in order to get your claim paid, you may feel bruised along the way, which therefore gives people a negative perception around the insurance company. I think there's some work to be done here by both insurance companies and the education around what is needed to get the claim paid. There's obviously, you're paying, in reality, the percentage of premium that you're paying or the cost of the insurance is negligible compared to the claim amount. And therefore, if insurers were just to pay out on everything, it would become a very difficult situation for them. So there is a process that they have to go through. They do need to have adequate information and make sure that the claim is a legitimate claim. But once that has been established, the vast majority of insurance companies that we've dealt with have been very good around settling those claims. Can
you talk to me about what a business can do to make that process easy? Obviously, when you're in a high-stress situation because something's broken or your business has burnt down, heaven forbid, that's obviously not a time that you should be thinking about trying to gather all of your information together. So what are some really good strategies that businesses can walk away with today that they might say, okay, in the event of this happening, here's all the information that I need for that. Have you got any top tips around that?
Yeah, I think it also goes both ways. I think from an insurance company perspective, we probably need more empathy around this. So, someone has potentially just lost their business, lost their livelihood, to really have much more empathy around how we deal with these people and understand, the impact it's had on them. And then I think from the insured's perspective, really to be organised before the event. And I guess, it's very easy to say and it's more difficult to do. Most of us are pretty chaotic in our personal lives and in our business lives. But really, it is about understanding, in the example that you've given where something has burnt down, it's understanding what assets you have and having proof of those assets and the cost of those assets and being able to where you would replace those assets, how much they cost, etc. So, having yourself adequately insured with the right sums insured and limits of indemnity makes it a lot easier. And it's like everything, the preparation really is the hard work. Once you have the claim or once, something happens, it's about, how well you're prepared beforehand. To be able to provide the information that you need to for the insurance company.
And it's about that rule as well, the golden rule of backup, backup, backup. Have all of your documentation, all your stuff in one place so that when you need to provide the evidence to show what was lost or what assets you did have that are now gone, you've got that on hand. So is that one of the things you're still experiencing, or is business getting better at making sure that they can access that documentation to prove what was lost is gone?
Yeah, it's a huge issue. And it's not only the documentation around the physical property that you're speaking about, but it's in the type of insurances that we've been speaking about to date, which has really been around the professionals and the trades. The focus has been on professional indemnity and public liability. And typically those are claims made against the business by third parties because a third party suffered a loss or a bodily damage or property, bodily injury or property damage. So in those situations, even having the documentation around the terms of the contract that you had with your customer or, the communication that you had with your customer, whether it was via email or if it was written correspondence, etc. Even having that form of documentation available is very important. When you spoke about something burning, again, there we're talking about more of a retail store and, or possibly a cafe or restaurant. And, if we go back to what we're speaking about around the building blocks, once again, the core thing that retail shops and cafes, restaurants should have is really the public liability. And then depending on what they have within their business, so if they have lots of stock, they should insure that stock. Or if they have refrigeration that's important, they need to make sure that refrigeration's covered. If they have electronic equipment and that's critical to them, then they need to make sure if that breaks down that they are insured for that. And all those products or all those coverages are under one product called a business pack. The key part of underinsurance is really around business interruption. And what's really interesting is you get a lot of businesses that adequately protect themselves around so many things, but then they have a fire and possibly they can get everything replaced because they're adequately insured, but they haven't taken out business interruption.
Yeah.
And therefore they have no income coming in for the 6 or 12 months that it takes to rebuild or restart their business, yet they have all their expenses.
Is that part of a pack? Like when people call up and they say, I want to insure my business, is that something that's already part of an established business pack as you describe it, or is it an add-on? And do you find that people say, I don't need that, take it off? Is that why the underinsurance is actually happening? Because people are saying that's not necessary?
Yeah, I think so. So to answer your first question, it is part of a pack. So in a business pack, you get a number of sections that are optional and you can choose to insure them or not. The first section and the most obvious section is public liability, but then you can insure everything from your buildings to your contents within the building to the business interruption, the electronic equipment breakdown, machinery breakdown, etc. So it's typically all in one package for any form of retail outlet. So again, cafe, restaurant, retailer, etc. And they can get, almost all the insurances, and usually not auto insurance or their car insurance within that package. So yes, it's all there, and if they want to get it all, it's all available. Again, the big issue that people have is they insure, so hopefully they adequately insure what they have and what they can see. They don't necessarily understand the consequences of the claim.
Is that because we all underestimate our own value, and we know that fundamentally in terms of mental health, that's something that small businesses have a big issue with, which is underestimating what they're actually worth? Do you think that's part and parcel of that inability to really see value in your own time and in fact, even your earning capability? Do you think that that's part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I often say to people, if you had a guaranteed, if someone gave you an asset that was giving you a guaranteed income, would you insure it? And the answer is yes. And then like, well, why wouldn't you insure your business, right? So it's the same concept. But I think the other thing is, on the flip side of that, we also have a belief that it won't happen to us.
Yeah.
And even if it does happen to us, it won't be that bad. And again, this comes back down to, in the beginning of the show, we were speaking about the probability versus the severity. And the key thing I always like to just re-emphasize is, don't worry about the probability. That if it's a low probability, it should just make your insurance cheaper. But if you're going to lose your business, if you're going to lose your livelihood, if you're not going to be able to take care of your family because you no longer have your business, those are the things you should insure against. And business interruption forms a key component of that, particularly for a retail business.
Now, I want to talk about, we're going to come have a quick break now, and then when we come back, I want to talk about that massive business interruption, which is digital disruption, and that can take the form of obviously cyber effects or cyber attack or even just something happening to your server or your hardware. And that can be much more detrimental than even, say, some property damage. So I want to take a break, and then we'll come back and talk with Michael from BizCover a little bit more about that. You've been listening to Small Biz Matters with Alexi Boyd. We'll be back after this. And you're back in the room with Triple H 100.1 FM and Small Biz Matters with Alexi Boyd. We're also live across the Community Radio Network. Thank you for joining us once again this week. If you've missed any of today's show, you can, of course, catch up via our podcast. There are over 140 podcasts on smallbizmatters.com.au covering a whole range of topics around small business education. In fact, we have yet to repeat a topic when it comes to small business education. There's also over 70 available on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, and you name your podcasting preference, and we are probably there. So have a listen, like us if you enjoy listening, and get in touch if you think of a topic that we haven't yet covered. There's been some very interesting ones that have been delivered to my inbox recently, people offering to come on the show and share with us their knowledge. So make sure you subscribe, and also subscribe to our newsletter at smallbizmatters.com.au. So today we are talking all about insurance and small business insurance. At the beginning of the program, we covered what stage you need to think about insuring yourself, depending on what your industry is, and the building blocks. What are the different types of insurance that you need, and to what level of cover should you consider? Now, Michael, just on that note, we've got Michael here from BizCover here in the studio, and I wanted to ask you about how frequently you should be examining your level of cover, because I know, a lot of insurers have things set up so that it automatically renews. You automatically roll over to the next lease or whatever it is, or the monthly instalments that you're paying, or if you pay all at once. How often should you be re-examining all those different aspects of your business, in your opinion? Yeah,
that's a fabulous question. I think the key thing there is how much your business changes. So again, if you set up your insurance correctly, and we spoke about the building blocks, if you have the correct building blocks in place and your business isn't dramatically changing, so you're not, substantially larger than you were the year before, you don't have, employees when you didn't have them before, you don't have offices when you didn't have them before, etc. If everything is relatively the same, it can just roll over and it can go from year to year. The products don't change dramatically over time, so, you're probably still adequately insured. Really, when your circumstances change, when you're doing a different occupation, when you moved premises, when you all of a sudden have more contents or more stock than you used to have, that is absolutely when you should reconsider it.
Could I ask also, just in relation to, you've got a very big piece of machinery or equipment. Do you have to worry about the depreciation of that piece of equipment? Does that affect it, or is it basically new for old? So if you need to replace it, you just replace it. So as long as you've got that equipment, it doesn't change over the 3-year life cycle of the piece of equipment. Does that make sense? Or is that something you need to consider?
Yeah, no, I think it's depending on the type of insurance policy, but really what happens is that you insure your your equipment for replacement value. So as long as you're adequately insured and you have insured that your assets, then that should be okay. The key thing is if you bring on new assets that haven't been insured, or if the amount that you've insured your assets for is underinsured, that becomes a bigger issue.
And that's something we forget about quite often, isn't it? We're so excited or in the process of expanding or buying all this equipment that we forget to then do a quick call to our insurance, provider and say, by the way, there's another, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 worth of equipment I need you to add on to my policy. And we often forget to do that. But then, if literally a week later you're robbed or something happens and all that equipment goes, that equipment is not insured because you haven't got the correct level.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And again, for most insurance policies, you don't necessarily need to specify the equipment, but it's about the sum that you've insured. So as long as it fits within that sum, then you'd be okay. But if you all of a sudden have a different sum insured, or if you have more contents, more stock, more equipment, then you do need to increase that. All insurance policies typically have a renewal date. Some of them roll over, but you should always get some kind of information from your insurance provider to let you know that it's rolling over, or that it's coming up for renewal and that it's going to roll over for the next year. And that just prompts you to say, if things have changed materially since the previous year, you probably should reconsider it.
So all of my small businesses out there today who are thinking to themselves, when was the last time I actually looked at what I was actually insured for? Why don't you go home today? It's a bit of homework for everybody. Have a look at your insurance policy. Get on the phone and talk to your policy provider and say to them, how much am I insured for? And if you look around you and you go, wow, there's actually a lot more equipment than when I took out this policy 5 years ago, that's probably a good little activity for you to do, is just to renew. And it's an easy process, right? You've just got to let them know the additional value that you want renewed or the change in circumstances. And then it's a pretty easy process. Your premium might go up or maybe even down.
Correct. So it should be relatively straightforward.
So let's talk about the future. And one of the big problems at the moment that's facing businesses that we are horribly underinsured for, I am sure, because I can imagine quite a number of the businesses that I deal with is cyber insurance and digital insurance. Let's talk about the impact of those things now and into the future on small business and how we can better protect ourselves.
So for me, the key thing about cyber insurance is it goes back to one of those building block products, which is if you have a cyber event happen to you, it is unlikely you'll be able to survive that event without having some form of protection or some kind of assistance to help you through that. So for me, again, while small business believe that the probability is low, the severity is very high. And unfortunately, the probability is actually much higher than people realize. So there are about 10 million cyber attacks every year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge number. And unfortunately, a decent percentage of those happen to small business. So it is not... it is not something that happens to a different business or to another business. It is unfortunately happening very much across the board. It is happening more and more. And it is absolutely, in my opinion, something that is relatively cheap to insure and something that people should be buying because the severity is something that you cannot handle on your own. And it's as simple as opening up an email with a virus, or someone providing you with a USB that you do a favor for someone, but they've hacked into your system. They lock down your system. They lock down your website. So any business that utilizes their website, utilizes technology.
Well, that's everyone.
Well, in theory, that is everyone, right? Yeah. So, if anyone is reliant on any form of technology, it's important to have cyber insurance. And really, the way cyber insurance really started was you have an obligation around privacy. And it's interesting because that's the thing that everyone always talks about. Well, I think that's actually a secondary issue. I think, yes, you absolutely have an obligation around privacy and you need to protect your client's data, etc. But, an equal issue and arguably a bigger issue is if you cannot operate any longer, you no longer have a business. And a cyber insurance policy often protects you around those things. It also assists you understand how it happened, why it happened. If there's a ransom, it pays the ransom to get your computer unlocked. It can cover your business interruption. So we spoke about business interruption earlier, but business interruption under a business pack which is your traditional insurance, does not cover a cyber event.
I was going to ask you about that actually, because we have talked quite a bit about business interruption. You need to have that add-on, which is the cyber security pack with business interruption that's relating to the cyber security attack. Am I right in saying that?
Correct. So you need two products. The first product is your business pack, which really covers all the fundamental insurances we spoke about. And then there's a separate product, which is typically not covered in a business pack, and that's called cyber insurance or cyber liability policy. And that covers both your third-party exposures, i.e. your breach of privacy. So someone has now accessed the information of your customers. And it also covers, or it can cover, should you elect to cover it, your first-party losses, i.e. Your systems have been locked down, or you have some kind of virus in your systems, you no longer can use your technology. You will get business interruption. So how long you'll be paid per day that you can't utilize your business.
Does that also cover you if you lose your laptop or lose your phone and somebody hacks into your system that way?
Yeah, so it won't cover you for the lost piece of equipment. That would be under your BizPack.
Yep.
But assuming there is a cyber attack on that, so they're able to, utilize something to hack in and then infiltrate into your system and cause problems, then that is what a cyber insurance policy covers. We had a great example a few years ago, which was when cyber insurance was just launched. We've had many cyber insurance claims with clients since then, but the first one is one I always remember because it was a consultant, a one-person business. She was a consultant that worked for that was doing work for financial services, so in the banks, etc. And what happened was she lost her laptop, and someone hacked into it. She had everything kind of back onto a server and backed up, but they corrupted all her files. She couldn't get back into it. And it was really interesting because what the insurance company assisted her with in that situation was identifying how she had been breached, restoring all her information, but then also her business interruption for the 3 days that she was unable to operate. So it was a really great outcome, and it just showed how a very small business and really part of the gig economy could be impacted by cyber insurance.
And that's interesting you give that as an example, because as you were talking in relation to what cyber insurance assists with, I was thinking to myself, there's probably people out there listening going, well, I don't have any employees, so nobody's going to be stupid enough to click on an email, and I don't have, I don't have a huge database full of people, so I don't have to protect them because I don't really send out newsletters. And in their minds, maybe thinking about all the bits and pieces that don't matter. But like you said, just imagine existing for even half a day with no access to emails. We know how much it drives us crazy when we go camping with the kids. So imagine what happens if you are locked out and the absolute sheer panic that you have. And then consider, like you said, not the likelihood, because that's quite high, but actually the disruption and how much that's going to affect your business. Even for just a few days, that can be monumental for someone. And even just someone as simple as losing a laptop, which can absolutely happen to anybody, and the effect that can have on the business. When you've even got everything backed up in the cloud. We've had cybersecurity experts come on the show before, and we've actually got someone coming on the next few weeks from Calamity. He talks about security and IT protection. And they always talk about this 3-2-1 idea, this idea that you've got to have 3 ways of backing up, 2 different places, and then 1 off-site, so that if everything burns down, you've got something off-site. Doing all those things and ticking all the boxes, doesn't that mean then you don't need cyber insurance, or do you still find people who have all those protections in place still get attacked?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the more redundancy you have and the more backups that you have, the better your situation. But we've got to remember that the cybersecurity criminals are probably a step ahead of us.
A bit cleverer than we are.
Bit cleverer than we are and usually ahead of the game. But the other thing is, if they lock down your system, if they infiltrate your system, they're probably going to infiltrate everything. So it's not necessarily just about the backup. It's what happens if they take control of your website. It's what happens if you don't even know they're within your database. So you don't even know that they're there for a period of time, and they could be doing a whole range of things within your business or within your database. So the backups and the protections and the passwords and all of those things absolutely assist. Insurance is just another mechanism to assist you in the event that all of those things don't happen. One of the things that we're seeing more and more often at the moment is really the sophistication of these cyber criminals has increased incredibly, and no longer are you getting emails from strange names or crazy, email addresses with lots of letters and lots of numbers that you obviously see are wrong, but you're actually getting it from a name from someone you know.
Yeah.
And, in the olden days, we could click on that email and we could see, again, they had just created a name, but the underlying email address was not correct. But now what's happening is they're infiltrating your system and they're sending an email from your email. And one of the things that we often see, now this is obviously in slightly bigger businesses, but you can understand the concept that it can happen to anyone, is they'll go into an email and they'll sit there and they'll watch the way you communicate. So then they'll send an email to, your external accountant or your bookkeeper, and they'll say, dear bookkeeper, as usual, please can you transfer $55,000 to this account to pay my whatever. But in addition to that, can you please do $5,000 to this account to sort out whatever it is? And, it's in the right tone, signed off by the right person with the right email address, and typically people action that. And then what the cyber criminal does is they do it again and again and again. And before you realize it, because they typically take small amounts, it's added up to a very substantial amount. So there's a whole range of sophistication that's around the cyber security or cyber criminal activity, which is well more advanced than where the protection is. And while the protection is absolutely excellent, and you should have as much of that as you can, we need to be realistic that some of the biggest companies in the world are being hacked at the moment, and they spend millions of dollars on cybersecurity. Smaller businesses don't have that resources.
Or when a 13-year-old can hack into Apple, like happened 12 months ago.
Exactly.
Just so he could get a job. That was interesting. So let's. Is that how AI is really affecting and like you said, they're learning the way that we speak and the tone of the emails. Is that where AI is coming into it when it comes to cyber attacks?
Truthfully, I'm not sure about how they're doing that. I think that's probably less around AI and more around actually physically getting in and sitting there for a while and learning. I think AI is a really interesting topic though within insurance. I think there's been very little innovation around around some of particularly the business insurance products and distribution channels. And what's great to see now is that the industry is embracing a lot more of technology, utilizing AI, utilizing machine learning. And I think the way that we're starting to see that now is we're seeing it more around the distribution channel. So, at BizCover, we are doing certainly a lot of AI learning, what people's preferences are, the type of products that they want, when they prefer to be contacted, how they prefer to be contacted, the type of information they're looking for, etc. But again, that will expand into utilizing it for pricing algorithms and for products and really,
So it's more around the streamlining of the process.
Absolutely. I think that's the initial benefit will be around streamlining the process to the benefit of the customer. And then, the second piece will be utilizing it around, for the insurance companies.
Let's take another quick break here on Small Biz Matters. Listen to some more community service announcements here at Triple H 100.1 FM. And when we come back, we're going to talk about one last really important topic, which is the future of insurance and how something like climate change might be affecting us as small businesses. You're listening to Triple H 100.1 FM. We'll be back after this. And welcome back to the studio. You are listening to Triple H 100.1 FM and Small Biz Matters Australia around Community Radio Network. My name is Alexi Boyd. We are talking all things insurance today. If you've just joined us, make sure you listen back to the podcast on smallbizmatters.com.au or wherever you get your podcasts from. We've got Michael here, who is the CEO and founder of BizCover Insurance, and we've been talking all about different ways to insure yourself, what you need to be aware of, things you can do to protect yourself, and the different types of insurance, particularly before the break about cyber insurance, which is so important. And to think of it as a different product, really, Michael, I think that that's really important. A lot of people might think that it's part of their biz pack or part of their standard insurance, but it's actually a bit of a bolt-on, isn't it, where you need to cover an attack, what might happen to your database, and then also what might happen to any business interruption that's relating to a cyber attack as opposed to just business interruption generally. I think that's a good takeaway from today.
Yep.
Now, let's talk about one last thing just before we come up to the news at the top of the hour. Let's talk about the change that we can all expect to happen in the next 5 or 10 years or so around climate change. Do you think that's going to be a major effect on all businesses? Is it going to push up our premiums? Is it something we need to be aware of? Do we need to protect ourselves, or does it depend on the industry that you're in?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating question. Climate change is a massive issue. It's on the national and international agenda. And I think we all have our, obligation to do something about it in our own small way. there is no doubt it'll have a massive impact on insurance because, weather patterns are very, very sensitive, to insurance results. And, the weather patterns can create catastrophes and very systemic issues. And if you think about it, some of the hailstorms or extreme heats, etc., that we're having, it really impacts, a number of businesses and therefore the insurance policies that they have. So the insurance industry is watching it very carefully and is very much involved in the climate change agenda. I think the reality for small business, though, is it really depends on the sector that you're in. Obviously, if you're in the agricultural sector, I think it's going to have a much bigger impact on you. If you have a large number of vehicles or anything that's in a fleet, I think that the reality is that we're seeing, more often we are seeing, hailstorms or extreme weather conditions that will impact those kind of things, your crops, your vehicles, etc. But the vast majority of businesses that we spoke about today, whether it's around professionals or trades, I think the impact will be less on that. And probably won't have the same impact on pricing. But I think as an overall industry, as the industry grapples with climate change and the impact that has on the number of claims, frequency of claims and severity of claims, that ultimately will have an impact on all pricing.
So it's a bit of a watch this space and see what happens. Do we have to keep an eye on our premiums? Should we be asking any questions of our insurers about this, or is it something that's still evolving?
I think it's something that's still evolving, particularly if you're not in that agricultural space. If you're in the agricultural space, I think you're probably already feeling it and you've already had some impact around it. But certainly if you're in, professions, trades and even most of retail, I think there's very, very little impact at the moment. But should you check your pricing, maybe not specifically around climate change, but, absolutely. If you feel like you want to, check your pricing and check the products that you have, it's pretty easy to do now. It's not, you can do it pretty inconspicuously and do it online, just getting alternative quotes. So there's lots of ways of doing it now which are not as time consuming as they used to be.
Indeed, and that's a good takeaway from today's program, the evolution of the insurance industry. I'd like to thank you so much for coming on the program. Now, how can people find out more about BizCover, Michael?
Thank you very much for having me. Probably the best way to find out more about us is to visit bizcover.com.au, and that's bizcover.com.au. We'd love to hear from you. There's a whole range of information on our website. You don't have to come there to transact your insurance. If you want to come there and just get a comparison quote to make sure that you're paying the right amount, you're welcome to do that. The site has a number of Australia's leading insurers on the panel, so we'd love to help all small businesses, and the best way to get us is bizcover.com.au.
And don't forget as well, BizCover has a fantastic range of small business education products, including BizWitty, which is available through social media channels. And they have a great ebook if you're starting out in business as well, which yours truly has contributed to. Thank you again for coming on the show, Michael.
Thank you.
Now, if you've missed any of today's program, you can catch up via smallbizmatters.com.au or wherever you listen to podcasts. There are over 140 topics. We have yet to repeat a topic, and there's great small business education at hand. If you'd like to become a media partner as well, get in touch. Alexi at smallbizmatters.com.au. Thanks for listening, everyone. We're coming back next week. We've got one of our ATO guests coming on the program to talk to us about another rollout and some more small business education. You've been listening to Small Biz Matters here on Triple H 100.1 FM.